and this week we are bringing you an exciting episode of our UND Aerospace Career Speaker Series, and I'm excited to introduce Mr. Ken Polovitz. Ken Polovitz serves as the Assistant Dean of Student Services for the John D. Odegaard School of Aerospace Sciences, and a neat little tidbit is he actually taught my section of Aviation 100 back in the mid-90s. He's actually been teaching 100 probably now for about 3 decades, and he's agreed to come in today and share his famous talk called The 5 Main Ingredients. And this is kind of the 5 main ingredients for success. So without further ado, because I know he'll need the whole hour to get through his 5 main ingredients, I'm going to introduce Mr. Ken Polovitz. Ken.
Thank you, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here. And again, my name is Ken Polovitz. I'm the Assistant Dean of Student Services. I've been in that role for a long time. And it's always fun to talk to the new students and certainly continuing students. So I'm going to take a few minutes just to talk about a little bit about myself and how I got into this aviation education. And then I'm going to go on and talk specifically about the 5 main ingredients, which is, I don't know how famous it is, but it helped me to conceptualize as I advise students how to get from point A to point B on any kind of career, but certainly a career in aviation and aerospace sciences. So it's fun to be here. Normally I just jump into the class and go at it, and this is my first live performance of the 5 main ingredients, and it is different, and as you folks know. So I want to give a special shout out to all the students who have endured mostly online learning and not getting that face-to-face and with your professors and your instructors and so forth. I know it's been difficult, and I want to acknowledge your patience and your resolve for the learning that is taking place remotely. And a special shout out to also to our alumni, many who have gone through the 5 main ingredients talk many times, but I understand some of them might be tuning into this presentation today. So I wanted to especially say thanks for what you do and being an outstanding graduate and so forth. A lot of what you do is very relevant for our new students, and so we appreciate all that you've done. I've been around a long time. I started at the University in Enrollment Services in 1979. I always wanted to learn how to fly, but never, as a kid and so forth, never really pursued it. And so again, I acknowledge you for pursuing your dreams and doing that. And I didn't do that, but I was out of graduate school, and I finally had enough time to enroll in the program here in Aviation 102, the private pilot course. Now, that was the summer of 1980. I took out another student loan and got it done. And I never worked so hard in my life, but I got it done to 3 months to the day, actually, and really worked hard and really enjoyed it. I was at admissions and enrollment services, so that's when the aviation program was just starting to gain some traction and attract students from all over the country. There was no student services in the aviation program. The Aerospace College wasn't a college yet, but I started working with a lot of the faculty. Very few are here still. Kent Lovelace, a shout out to him. He was actually my ground school instructor in the summer of '80. And John Odegaard, our dean that founded the college and the program. And so we started working closely. Now I had a private pilot certificate, and I was in admissions, so I was an expert on coming to UND and majoring in aviation and certainly the careers on it. Well, that was a big learning curve for me, but it all started to come together. In 1985, John Odegaard said, why don't you come over and be an advisor and do this full-time, so to speak. And that's the best move I've ever made. So I've been with aerospace or aviation since 1985 and have thoroughly enjoyed, and it's been a wonderful flight for me. And the best part of what I like to do, of course, is students. Be involved with the students and advising and not only academic advising, but career advising and so forth. And certainly all the wonderful staff and faculty members that I've worked throughout the, it's been so much fun. And to share my passion for education and certainly for your learning, but also in the context of aviation. As you know, this is the largest industry in the world. The aviation, aerospace industry is one of the largest industries in the world, but it's the most close-knit. And that's what makes it fun. And so as I settled into Odegaard Hall, and that was the only building here, I started thinking about, okay, how am I going to start advising students on how to get from point A to point B, and especially in aviation. So over the years, I did come up with what I call Ken's 5 main ingredients. And this is really basic stuff. It's not anything too profound, but I'm not very profound. So I conceptualized it into 5 main things that I think will work no matter what career you're looking at pursuing, but certainly looking at specifically aviation. And it's kind of worked. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to just go through it with you and keep it simple, which is the best thing to do in my mind. And so, again, it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you about that. And again, it's nothing earth-shattering, it's nothing that profound, but I boiled it down to, again, these 5 main things. Now, the first thing, of course, is your education. That's a pretty obvious thing, but, and that's why you're here. You're building a solid foundation, education, not only liberal arts, but certainly aviation. And that's like going to class every day and studying and so forth. I've always asked my students, or asked students to look at it as, if you've ever done any building, whether it's Legos or certainly any hands-on building where you might have helped somebody build a garage, or maybe some of you have been in construction, you know the most important part of any structure is its foundation. And that's how I've asked students to kind of look at, well, not kind of, but look at, as you build your foundation for a career, regardless of what it is, you want to make sure it's true, it's square, and it's strong. And so I've always asked students to look at every class period you attend as a block, a building block that you're putting into your foundation. And to get the most out of every class period you attend. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but if you think about it in this way, if you skip class, you didn't put that block in the foundation, if you just kind of hang out and didn't get the most out of it, you were in class or you attended it online, but you just didn't feel like getting anything out of it, that you did put that block in, but it's not very strong. And if you have enough of that, your foundation is going to not be as strong as it needs to be. And so look at every class period you attend as a building block for your foundation. And I know that's easier said than done, but when you think about it, how much do you pay tuition and lab fees and everything else for each class period that you attend? You're paying a lot of money for that one particular class, that one particular building block. And so you want to get the most out of it anyway, because it makes sense, but you certainly make sense for your future and building of your foundation. So that's the first one. It's your education. Now, it's easy to assume we know a lot of things and we don't have to sit through all the class periods and so forth, but that's not true. You learn so much by getting the most out of every class. And you start building as you finish your freshman year, you keep adding your blocks on top of that. And soon after you, certainly as you approach your senior year, it's starting to solidify that foundation. But think about it, in any career that you're looking at, you're going to have lifelong learning. And certainly in this industry, You're going to go through recurrent training. You're going to go through, regardless if you're flying or air traffic control or moving up the ladder in airport management or any management opportunities or paths that you can follow in the industry. You're always going to be learning. And so you're always going to be adding to that foundation. So keep that in mind. It's the most important thing that you can do. Now, the second one goes pretty much hand in hand with the first one, but it's more technical, or I call hands-on learning, that adds to your number one, the foundation, but in a little bit different way. I've always used the example of if you wanted to be a dentist. Now, I've been saying that for a long, long time, and I don't think anyone's wanted to be a dentist. I always ask parents how many are dentists, and I finally got one a couple of summers ago. But if you want to go into dentistry, you need a 4-year degree in something, generally sciences, and then you hopefully get accepted to dental school. And then the first 2 years of dental school generally is back to foundation, or back to number one, in the classroom, learning and so forth about dentistry as a whole. And then the second, start of the second, and certainly the third and fourth year, you are actually doing some more hands-on or technical education and training for that matter. So at some point in your second or third year, generally your second year into your third, you got to get your hands in somebody's mouth and learn how to fix teeth. You're using the knowledge you got from ingredient number one, but you're also in there working with your hands, applying that knowledge in more of a technical, hands-on way. So how does that figure towards aviation? Well, a very obvious one for those of you that want to be a professional pilot is your flight training. Getting out to the airport, preparing for each flight. Go on that flight, learn, apply what you've learned in the ground school, so to speak, and now put that into hands-on learning actually in the aircraft. That makes sense, and so that's adding a little bit polish, so to speak, to your foundation, because that's part of it, obviously. You can be a 4.0 student in the classroom, but if you're not applying yourself directly or hard enough in the lab, in the flight lab, you're not necessarily going to be successful or build that strong foundation. ATC labs, get the most out of them, where you're actually on the scope and you're a little bit more hands-on, obviously. How does that apply to airport management and other careers? Well, if you do an internship, in airport management, there's a good chance you're going to be out mowing the ditch or mowing the runways or plowing snow, whatever. More hands-on training that applies to your actual career that you're looking at. And so that one's very, very important. And it certainly builds on the first one. But again, for those of you, and it's the majority of you that want to be a professional pilot, it really makes sense. You have to get the most out of every lab that you attend. And back to that, you're certainly paying a lot of money for that, and you want to get the most of you can from it, obviously. So, okay, so those are the two really foundation building, so to speak. And as you move along in building your foundation, as you get to certainly your junior and senior year, and even as you graduate, obviously you need some experience. Now, back when I started, it was very, very difficult to get that that first job without any experience. And that's somewhat true again today, as the industry's has been affected immensely by the pandemic and so forth and so on. Now, word of encouragement, it's going to come back. But experience is necessary. I mean, back when I started, a lot of students assume that if you come through the program and you graduate, that you'd become a airline pilot when you graduated. Well, obviously that's never worked that way. And so that's why I threw that experience thing in there. It's a vital part of getting from point A to point B with your career. You need experience. And as the industry went up and down and so forth, we came to the last 10 years where you didn't need as much experience to get to the level that you wanted to be. But it doesn't happen overnight. And that's one thing that we've always talked to our students about is be prepared for putting in your dues, so to speak, but learning on the job, so to speak, gaining that experience so you can get to the level that you want to go to. Because you don't graduate and go right to the same level that, or the level that you'd like to get to. It's just like you graduate from law school, you don't become a partner right away. Or you're an accounting major and you aren't an instant partner in the accounting firm that you're working for. You have to start gaining that experience one day at a time and doing well, working hard, and then someday you will, because of that experience, falling back on your foundation, that adding experience to that you're going to get to the level or achieve to the level that you want to go to. And so experience is very, very, very important still today. So look at it. How can you gain experience while you're in school? Certainly internships, cooperative education opportunities. There are a lot of them out there. Things have slowed down a little bit with the situation we're in now currently, but again, it's all going to come back. And don't overlook those experience opportunities, experience building opportunities that are still there today and will become more numerous as we work through these times that we're in. So grab anything you can, ideally related to your field, but even if it's not, all employers like to see some type of work experience. And it doesn't really matter what it's in. They want to see that you have a work track record. And that's very, very important as you move forward. And I know there's a lot of things bombarding you right now, but any part-time job where you adhere to a schedule or you work with others, obviously, and a supervisor and so forth, that's invaluable as you move up the ladder and as you move towards your ultimate career goal. So that's a big one. And it's easy to assume, oh, I got my foundation, I've got my technical, my hands-on, I'm doing really, really well. So as soon as I graduate, everyone's going to want me. Doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way. We wish it did. And in the past several years, it was working more quickly. But things are going to get more competitive again, a lot more than they were just 8 months ago. And so you've got to understand that any card that you can hold in your hand is going to get you further along in this card game of life, so to speak, towards your career goals. So very, very important. Gain experience no matter what it is, ideally in the industry that you're looking at, in this case, the aviation industry. Fourth one's a big one. Big, 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 big one. Now you most likely know, since you're here in the program, the importance of medical. And that's become more pertinent as we've gone through this pandemic thing, is certainly the FAA standards say you have to achieve or get the proper medical, whether you're looking at professional flight or even leisure flight, personal flight, but certainly professional flight. And whether you're looking at air traffic control, which has a medical standard to it that you have to adhere to, or have to get and then adhere to it. But even if you're in airport management or a non-flying or non-ATC career, it just makes really common sense to take care of yourself. And again, that's become more pertinent as we've gone through this pandemic thing. But even before the pandemic, it just made sense, regardless of what career you're looking at. Now, again, in aviation, as most of you know, it's highly regulated. Not only do you have to get the proper medical, but you have to keep it. You have to keep it. As you probably know, if you're looking at professional flight, you want to be an airline pilot every 6 months. That captain goes in and gets a medical. It's an ongoing thing for most professionals in this career, certainly flight, ATC, and so forth. But even if it's not regulated or required, again, it makes good sense to keep as much of as medically up to speed, so to speak, as you can. So not only do you have to get it, but you have to keep it. So take care of yourselves. Now I know when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you think you're indestructible. I get that. But certainly the current situation we're in shows that we're not. Nobody is. And so you really have to make good decisions when it comes to everything, but certainly your health. I'm a little hard of hearing because I haven't taken care of my ears when I'm out either chain sign or doing those kinds of things, hunting, shooting shotguns and so forth. I don't do a lot of that anymore, but in my youth I did. And now I'm paying for it. With my wife says I need hearing aids, and then of course I'm ignoring her and just I think it's convenient to have selective hearing when it comes to that. But anyway, it's really important. Take care of yourself, not only physically but psychologically. And there's a lot of not so good things happening in the world. Certainly the current situation. There's a lot of emotional stress going on and so forth. It's important that you stay healthy mentally as well. And if you find yourself maybe not feeling the healthiest, certainly physically, but mentally, it's okay to ask for help. You want to get that cleared up before it gets too deep. And you can have all these other things down. You can have the strongest foundation. You've built a strong foundation. You can have some great training and even experience and so forth. But if you can't keep your medical, nothing else matters. Or if you lose your medical for some reason, hopefully you can get it back, but it's going to be an interruption in your career. And so that one's a big one. Not only you have to get it, the proper medical, but you have to keep it. And a lot of that comes down to making good decisions. Now I know you've been preached to for most of your life about drug and alcohol and so forth and so on. But regardless of how competitive this industry's gotten and so forth, you really, really need to make the right decisions on that. So no tolerance industry, it's real. Even in the good times when graduates would have 4 or 5 offers as they graduated, and again, those times are going to come back. If they have any marks on their record, so to speak, because of bad choices, that's going to make them obviously less competitive. Now, time can heal some of these things, but you really want to move along without taking any interruptions. So it's very, very important you make the right decisions when it comes to that. And I know you've heard a lot about it, But one of the things that I have done throughout the years is sit on the review boards of students who didn't make right decisions. And it's really hard to see that interruption in their career progression and certainly their education and the building of their foundation. Now, if it's bad enough, it could be career ending. And so don't go there. It's going to stay that as a no tolerance industry, and it's part of the medical certification process. And so be aware of that, and I know you are, but I can't emphasize how strong that is, because again, you could have all this other things nailed, but if you lose your medical or you can't go to work for whatever reason, if the medical isn't required, it's going to interrupt your career. And so very, very important. The last one is probably, they're all important, but this one's a big one. Your personal attributes. You've laid a strong foundation. Maybe even a 4.0 student. It's pretty hard to do, but we've seen a lot of them. Your hands-on training has been wonderful. You've met every lesson. You've gotten the most out of every flight lab or ATC lab, or you had a great experience level, which would be a little bit hard to do if you don't have this one. Medical, you're great, you're fit. There's no problems there, but your ability to get along and work well with others, your honesty, your integrity, your potential for leadership, if that's not there, you're going to be stopped dead in your tracks. Or if you are able to move forward, it's going to catch up to you. Can't talk enough about that one. Again, you could have all these other things nailed, but if you don't have the personal attributes that every employer is looking for, regardless if it's outside of aviation or aerospace, every employer is looking for that. What kind of person are you? Can you relate well with others? How honest are you? What's your integrity? What are your communication skills like? You've all heard about being in the flight deck for a long flight with a fellow pilot that you've never met before. How well are you going to get along with that person? How well are you going to get along with the rest of the crew? Such a big part of any career, but certainly this one. As I mentioned earlier, this is the largest industry in the world, but it's the closest knit. And so you have to start out today, if you haven't started already, is developing those partnerships, developing those communication skills. Be honest, work hard, because if you're not, it's going to catch up to you. And regardless of how open this industry's been, the ups and downs, and certainly it's closed right now a little bit, quite a bit actually. But keeping those partnerships, keeping your ability to stay in touch with the industry, stay in touch with people in the industry. Let me give you an example. We've had airlines in here through 50 years worth of airlines coming to campus and hiring students or graduates, certainly our flight instructors and so forth. But you will find out that if you are not honest or you are not able to get along as a student, that could haunt you as you progress. We used to have Horizon Airlines used to be one of the first premier airlines that started low time hiring. And they hired relatively low time, and so when they'd come back, so they hired a whole bunch of UND graduates initially when they started this low time hiring program. When they come back to interview and so forth, they would get their stack of resumes and those that applied, and all the airlines do this, but they would look at the names and so forth, and then they'd go to their current new hires from UND, and they say, Jill here has applied. Do you know her? Now this is the new hire that was talking, and yeah, we were actually roommates together. Well, what can you tell me about her? Well, we weren't roommates very long because we just didn't get along. Jill was a little bit whatever. She wasn't very personable. She wasn't very honest with me, and so forth and so on. Anyway, they're asking for a recommendation, and a lot of that is not as open as it used to be, but there's ways of doing it anyway. And so, or she was a flight student of mine, and she really didn't work that hard, and she kind of had a bad attitude upon different things or whatever, and that's all the HR people and the chief pilot needs to hear, and it's not going to go very well if they even grant that person an interview. And so what you're doing now, how you work well and get along with others, your potential for leadership is important today. And so that is, in my opinion, the biggest one of the 5 main ingredients. And you can talk to anyone, any of our graduates, and certainly for the alumni that are out there, they know this. And it's remarkable how whatever you do, good and bad, can stay with you in this close-knit industry. Foundation, hands-on technical experience, medical. Now, when you get that big interview someday, they're going to assume, the employer, let's say you want to fly for Delta. When that interview comes, they're going to assume, even for some of the pathway programs and so forth where you're not actually hired yet, but they're going to assume when you're interviewing for that, they're going to assume you know how to fly, that you've gotten a good education. Because they've looked at your resume, they know that. You've done well in school, you've worked hard, you've done well with your flight training, your flight courses, you progressed well. Yeah, you might have had some hiccups here and there. Everyone's had those, but overall you've done well. You've gained some good experience, maybe had an internship and so forth. Medical, of course, is good. Nothing on your record that's going to stall the process. They know all that by looking at your application, by looking at your resume. But what they don't know is, what kind of person are you? What kind of person are you? Again, your honesty, your integrity, your communication, your overall ability to work well and get along with others. That's what they're looking for at that stage. And if they can't pick that up, or if they've had a bad vibe from somebody, from the outside or whatever, it's still going to be competitive enough where they're not going to necessarily follow through on offering you a class date. So, very, very important. And again, that's true regardless of what you're doing. We've often heard, we can teach you, you can learn everything else, but if you don't have those, that's tough. And so, you got to work on it. You know, something that hopefully you've developed early, your ability to work well and get along with others, but if you do have some shortcomings along the way, you want to work on that, obviously. Keep an open mind. Appreciate everyone else's experiences and opinions and so forth. You don't always have to agree, but certainly be willing to work well and get along with others, because it's a very diverse world out there, as we know. A lot of things going on, and you're going to have to work with these individuals in your company that you were flying for, or managing, or air traffic control, and whatever it might be. You're gonna be you have to get along, or it's not going to work out. So I've kind of rambled on, which is normal for me, but I go back to when I first started here as advising students on how to get from point A to point B with with their career progression, simplifying it. Like I said earlier, this isn't rocket science stuff by any means. This is really basic stuff, but still very, very important. Boiling it down to get the major concepts out of these 5 things. And I think for the most part, it covers everything, regardless, and I've mentioned this before, regardless of what career you want to go into or who you want to work for someday. But it's certainly applicable to aviation. So as I started learning more and more about the industry and how it works, and how do you become an airline pilot, how do you become an air traffic controller, how do you become a military pilot or anything in the industry, these all apply. And some a little bit more directly, and a little bit more, some of them are a little bit more, the parameters are a little tighter on some of these. And so you have to realize that. And so as you look towards the future, and you know, again, I applaud you for hanging in there, especially the 100 class, because most of you are first semester students. It can seem overwhelming at times, and it's easy to get, certainly now, it's easy to get disenchantized about it, about everything, you know, we get that. But just keep in mind that if you work hard and do well, keep these 5 main ingredients in mind, it's going to work out for you. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to work out exactly how you want it to, but if you keep the values in place, keep the concept in place that, okay, I got to go to my 6:30 launch at the airport. It's dark, it's cold. I really don't want to get out of bed. It's nice and warm in here in my bed, and I just would just like, you got to keep the drive going. And like I said, it's not always easy, and sometimes it's very difficult. But if you keep it going, you're adding 1 block at a time to your foundation. And those students that hang in there and do well, and I've advised thousands of students throughout the years. It's amazing the progress they make as they move along and they add to their foundation. And that's what makes my job most rewarding, is seeing how students who have worked hard, hung in there, despite all the obstacles out there, that, you know, I've always said some of them come into the first year of first semester. This is a little too simplified, but some of them don't even know how to spell aviation. Not really, but some of them don't. But anyway, so they're pretty green, obviously, and that's the way it should be. You've just started building your foundation. And 3-4 years later, they're flight instructing, and a year later, they're hired by a regional airline, or hired into an air traffic control in-route center or whatever. And I'm just going, wow. It wasn't easy for them, but they held it. And so that's my pep talk to keep it going. That's what I want to emphasize, that it's not always going to be easy. But if you keep in mind, you know, and you can add a lot of things to this, but like I said, I boiled them down. If you keep the focus on those, and you work hard, stay focused, you're going to be successful as you progress through, despite all the obstacles that are out there. It's something that that happens. And what you have to do is for anything that you unsat, whether it's certainly a stage check or a test that didn't go well or whatever, you have to take responsibility for it. That's the best thing. Again, back to that big interview, you're not going to have, the interviewers know that everything isn't perfect. And sometimes if everything's perfect, that might be almost a red flag, because nobody's perfect. But when you do have failures or when you do hit a pothole, take responsibility for it. You can't blame anyone but yourself. Now it's easy to blame someone else. Well, that stage check pilot was, that person is really tough and they don't, well, guess what? You're going to have stage check pilots all through your career that are tough. They have to be. And so you have to take responsibility for it. And that's the most important part. Also look at it as a learning experience. The very limited flying I've done some really stupid things. But I did obviously learn from it. When I got back on the ground, I said, well, that was a learning experience. I'm never going to do that again. I took responsibility for my stupid decisions. I learned from it, and I moved on. And so that would probably be the biggest advice. Now, if you unsat and unsat and unsat, and you had a whole big history of that, then something isn't working. And before you get into that mode, so to speak, you want to sit back and have a reality check and say, okay, why is this happening? Generally, it's because you're not taking responsibility, you're not focused, you're not working hard enough. So, but it happens to everyone. And back to that big interview, they want to know. If you blame someone else for your unsatisfactory progress and whatever it might be, the interview's over. They'll wind it up real quickly. And so even though you might think in your mind it's someone else's fault, and sometimes it might be, but you have to take responsibility for it. Well, you've all heard this a million times, but and it's been tougher this semester, but get involved. It doesn't mean you have to be president of any club or anything, but get involved. The leadership will come from that, the leadership experiences. And again, it's been tougher this semester, but stay engaged because the leadership will come. If you stay engaged in any activity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in an aviation student organization, certainly across campus. Stay engaged in that. Work hard with that too, but the leadership will start developing. It naturally does. If you stay engaged and you're working hard in whatever it might be, even your part-time job, work hard with that. Pretty soon you're going to be asked to, hey, I know you don't have a lot of time, but could you be the mid-shift supervisor? Now you're gaining that leadership, that experience, and certainly across campus. And even if a lot of it's been virtual, just about all of it, stay engaged virtually. That's how leadership starts to develop. And by staying engaged, that's what I would say. Certainly starting out as a first-year student is go to everything or get on the Zoom on everything that the program, the college here has invited you to. You're a long way from, certainly if you're a first semester student, you're a long way from interviewing for the Propel program for Delta, so to speak. But go to those open sessions. Find out what it's going to take. you're invited to all of them. And when it was in person, you know, it was easy to say, well, I'm not ready for that. You know, I'm only just a first semester student. I'm not even flying yet. That doesn't really, no, go to all of them. It's easy to say that's not for me. And I always have referred to students, and I'm totally guilty of this. We all are, but I'm probably one of the, in my past life and so forth, of not pursuing opportunities or not even finding out about them. Taking the time to check it out. So that's not for me. But then shoulda, coulda, woulda. Maybe a year later you went, oh, that's how that worked. And I would have been eligible if I would have taken the steps for that internship or whatever, that opportunity, even as a sophomore. So as much as possible, zoom in on all these talks from the industry leaders. Look for all the opportunities that are out there in person. And again, they're going to come back. Things are going to come back. And when they do, stay engaged and look at everything that's possible. Even if you thought that would be the last thing I'd ever want to do as a career, go to that talk and find out. Because it might strike a chord with you and you go, you know what, I never knew that. And that's something that I'm going to look into a little further. So that'd be my answer to that one. I floated around as an undergrad for about 3 years, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I always had an interest in history and in government and political science, so I finally had enough credits where I started taking courses in all those areas. So I ended up with an undergraduate major in political science and history. And then I asked myself, well, what am I going to do with that? You know, I didn't have very good planning. About that time I fell in love and got married, and then I had to be responsible. So I was always interested in education. And so I went back and got my teaching certification for teaching high school social sciences, and never really pursued that. But what I did do as an undergrad is I was very involved in student activities. And I enjoyed working with the student services staff across campus. And my part-time job was in the student union. I worked there for 3-4 years, and I got to know all the student services, student affairs people. And I said, boy, that's really interesting. You're in higher ed, but you're helping students and working with students and so forth. I think I'd like to do that. And so they said, well, you minimally need a master's degree. I went out and got that. And as I said earlier, I always wanted to learn how to fly. I was a typical kid that was interested in aviation, building models and so forth, but never pursued it because I didn't take that next step, I guess. So I've learned from that. So I finally said, I'm going to learn how to fly. And you're right, Beth, I kind of changed from education into aviation, but aviation education. And in this case, more advising and career advising and academic advising and so forth. But I've had the opportunity to work with industry for the last 40 years, work with fabulous faculty members here, not only here, but across the country, and it's been a great flight for me. So I never pursued specifically professional aviation other than professional aviation education. Well, I'm a believer in any type of experience is good experience, work experience. Even though it may not be in the industry, ideally there's so many opportunities out there directly in the industry to get that internship or that direct work experience. But sometimes there's not enough for everybody, and it's competitive. And today it's more competitive than it was certainly 6 months ago. Again, it's going to start opening up, so grab onto those. But regardless, what employers are looking for in this industry, ideally it's within the industry, but probably more than that, they're looking for how do you adhere to a work schedule? Have you been consistently on time? Have you shown some leadership? Have you been promoted to supervisor or whatever? How did you deal with others? All that's important, and it doesn't necessarily have to be directly in the industry, but ideally, yes. But any work experience where you have established a track record of responsibility, excelling, improvement, learning, and certainly it gets back to ingredient number 5 is your ability to work well and get along with others. That's what you're always working with somebody, unless you're a hermit somewhere working out in a cabin in the woods. But not too many of us are built that way. Oddly enough, when I started in '85 over here in the Order Guard School, there weren't really many internships. The FedEx internship, flight coordination it was called, was actually the very first internship that came to us, and for management type positions that could lead. It wasn't any proven path, but what it did was give experience. FedEx got to know that person, and if you wanted to be a professional flight pilot, then you of course had to get the experience and so forth. But that was the very first one. And yes, there's still, unfortunately, like many internships, it wasn't as popular as it used to be because they had other choices to go to, or students could go to. And then what we saw in recent years is students said, you know what, I don't need an internship. I can get there without one, which was somewhat true, but again, it was short-sightedness in my opinion. But to answer that question, I think we still have that opportunity, and so we encourage students to look for that and all the other ones that are out there, because since the late 80s when that one came on board, the opportunities have exploded. And you're going to see more of those opportunities come back. And so don't look past them. Stay engaged, look for all those opportunities, because again, that's another card you hold in your hand. Now, whether you have to play it or not, but oddly enough, that specific one, when the FedEx people came here, this is how close-knit this community can be. They came and interviewed, and we were so excited to finally have a major company like FedEx offer these internships. And the lady, I'm going to escape me, Linda, I can't think of Linda's last name right now, and that's not good for me, but anyway, she was the coordinator for the internships, and she was integral in that. Anyway, fast forward 30 plus years forward, and Linda was one of the coordinators when Josh Christensen and I flew down to Tucson to meet with her. She was the coordinator of the trust for the FedEx. Help me, Beth, what's it called? The FedEx Scholarship Endowment? The Crow Scholarship? Yeah, the Crow Scholarship. So we reacquainted, and she knew of our students because of that internship, that it eventually came around selecting UND for the $2+ million Crow endowment for scholarships for our students. And so we reacquainted and I said, I remember all that. So look, at 30 years later, we engaged again, and she knew us, and we got to, I remembered her, and it all worked out. So. Do a double major or a minor, not necessarily because you're undecided, but you have interests in both. It's generally going to cost you more money in tuition and take you longer. We've always talked about a professional backup plan. If plan A doesn't work out, you have a plan B to follow on. That's where a double major can help you. It's not a guarantee. You know, if you quadruple major, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get to your first interest faster or better, but it does build a more broad foundation, and it gives you something to fall back on if you need to. And it also can enlighten you. You might think you want to be a professional pilot, but you're also interested in business management. And as you get into those courses as a double major or even a strong concentration, you might find out, you know what, I'm finding this more interesting than flying for whatever reason. And there's opportunities I never thought of in the management side or whatever. And so that's where I think another concentration or a double major can help you. And again, as I mentioned, there's no guarantees that it's going to, but it's another card you hold in your hand. And if you have to play it, you've got it. So.